Staff Sergeant Valentina Torres wiped grease from her hands as she emerged from beneath the M1A2 Abrams tank, its massive bulk casting shadows across the dusty maintenance bay at Forward Operating Base Serpent. The desert heat shimmered through the open hangar doors while she methodically checked hydraulic lines and track tension. Most soldiers saw her as just another mechanic, someone who kept the steel beast running while the real warriors fought the war. Torres had grown accustomed to being invisible to the dismissive glances and casual assumptions about her role in this theater of operations. The radio crackled with routine chatter from various units across the region. Torres half listened while adjusting a stubborn bolt, her experienced ears automatically filtering important communication for background noise. Before we continue this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe military families are common in your area. Something in the radio traffic caught her attention. A SEAL team designation she recognized, callsign Neptune 6, reporting movement toward a high-value target deep in hostile territory. 40 miles northeast of the base, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Kane led Neptune 6 through a labyrinth of rocky outcroppings and abandoned villages. The six-man SEAL team moved with practiced silence, their boots finding purchase on loose stone and packed earth. Intelligence had indicated a high-value terrorist leader was coordinating attacks from a fortified compound in the valley ahead. Kane checked his watch and hand-signaled his team to halt behind a cluster of boulders. The compound sprawled below them like a concrete maze, surrounded by walls topped with razor wire. Guard towers punctuated the perimeter, and Kane could make out at least 12 enemy combatants through his scope. His radio man, Petty Officer Collins, whispered into his headset, confirming their position to command. Back at Serpent, Torres continued her maintenance routine, but her attention remained split between her work and the radio chatter. She recognized the tactical terminology and grid coordinates being transmitted. Her fingers paused on a wrench as she processed the information flowing through the communications network. The SEAL team was heading into an area she knew well from studying regional maps during her off hours, a dangerous funnel where enemy forces often concentrated their defenses. Kane's careful reconnaissance revealed a nightmare scenario. What intelligence had described as a lightly defended compound was actually a heavily fortified stronghold. Through his binoculars, he counted not 12, but at least 30 enemy fighters, with heavy machine gun emplacements and what appeared to be rocket-propelled grenade positions. The target building sat in the center like a fortress within a fortress. Collins whispered urgently into his radio, requesting immediate support and updated intelligence. The response crackled back with devastating clarity. No air support available for 6 hours due to weather conditions at the nearest airfield. They were on their own. Torres heard the exchange through the base communication system. She set down her tools and moved closer to the radio, her mind automatically analyzing the tactical situation. The SEAL team was walking into a trap, and they didn't fully realize the scope of what they faced. She pulled out a detailed topographical map of the region, one she had studied extensively during her previous deployment. Her finger traced the terrain features around the compound, identifying potential approach routes and escape corridors that weren't visible from the SEAL's current position. Kane made the decision to proceed despite the overwhelming odds. His team had trained for impossible situations, and turning back without attempting the mission would mean losing their only chance at this high-value target. They began their descent into the valley, using cover and concealment techniques perfected through years of special operations training. 20 minutes into their approach, everything went wrong. Enemy sentries spotted movement and opened fire. The crack of AK-47s echoed off the canyon walls as muzzle flashes erupted from multiple positions. Kane's team dove for cover behind scattered rocks, pinned down by crossfire from 3 different directions. Bullets whined overhead and sparked off stone surfaces. Torres heard the distinctive sound of automatic weapons fire through the radio transmission, followed by Kane's terse voice calling for immediate extraction. She abandoned her maintenance work entirely and moved to the tank she had been servicing. Her hands ran along its armored hull, with practiced familiarity. This particular Abrams had been her responsibility for 8 months, and she knew every system, every capability, every tactical advantage it could provide. The engine was running perfectly after her morning maintenance, fuel tanks full, ammunition loaded. Petty Officer Rodriguez screamed as a bullet tore through his shoulder, his rifle clattering against the rocks. Kane pressed himself lower as enemy fire intensified, realizing they had walked into a carefully orchestrated ambush. The compound's defenders had herded them into a kill zone with overlapping fields of fire. Collins frantically called for emergency extraction while applying pressure to Rodriguez's wound. The radio crackled with their desperate situation reports flowing back to command. Torres listened to every word while making her decision. She climbed into the driver's compartment of the Abrams, her movements swift and deliberate. The massive diesel engine rumbled to life beneath her, 68 tons of American steel and firepower responding to her touch. Without authorization, without orders, without backup, Torres engaged the transmission and rolled the tank out of the maintenance bay. Other personnel shouted questions as she maneuvered past supply trucks and administrative buildings. She ignored them completely, her focus locked on the coordinates she had memorized from the radio chatter. The tank's tracks churned through loose sand as she navigated toward the base perimeter, heading into terrain that would test both her driving skills and the Abrams' legendary mobility. Kane's ammunition ran dangerously low as enemy fighters closed their positions. He counted at least 40 muzzle flashes now, with more insurgents pouring from hidden bunkers and concealed positions. The compound had been a trap from the beginning, designed to lure American forces into an inescapable killing ground. His team's training was exceptional, but they were vastly outnumbered and running out of options. Torres navigated the Abrams through increasingly difficult terrain, the tank's suspension absorbing impacts from rocks and gullies that would disable lighter vehicles. She had studied this route during countless hours of tactical planning that nobody knew about, memorizing every ridge line and potential obstacle. The tank's GPS showed 32 miles to the firefight, but she knew shortcuts through dried river beds and mountain passes that would cut the distance significantly. The radio filled with increasingly desperate transmissions, as Kane reported 2 more wounded and critically low ammunition. Torres pushed the Abrams harder, its turbine engine screaming as she navigated a particularly steep descent. Dust clouds marked her passage across the desert landscape as she closed the distance between herself and 6 men who didn't even know help was coming. Kane's voice cracked through the radio with grim finality. "This is Neptune 6. We are surrounded and taking heavy casualties. Request immediate air support for emergency extraction. We have wounded and are running critically low on ammunition. Enemy strength estimated at battalion level with heavy weapons." Command's response offered no comfort. Neptune 6, negative on air support. Weather conditions prohibit flight operations for minimum 4 hours. Ground reinforcements are 8 hours out. Can you hold your position? Kane looked at his decimated team. Rodriguez had lost consciousness from blood loss, and Sergeant Morrison clutched a makeshift bandage against a head wound. Their ammunition wouldn't last another 10 minutes against this sustained assault. Hold position? Kane almost laughed at the impossibility. Torres heard every word as she crested the final ridge overlooking the valley. Through the tank's periscope system, she could see the compound spread below her like a concrete labyrinth. Muzzle flashes erupted from dozens of positions as enemy fighters maintained their devastating crossfire on 6 tiny figures pinned behind inadequate cover. She had arrived at the exact moment when hope had run out completely. Kane distributed his last magazine among the team members, each man receiving only a handful of precious rounds. The enemy fighters had grown bold, advancing from covered positions with coordinated fire and movement tactics. Through his scope, Kane watched insurgents preparing rocket-propelled grenades for a final devastating assault on their position. Collins made one last transmission. "Command, this is Neptune 6. We're out of options. If you can hear this, Tell our families we completed the mission as far as possible. Enemy forces are preparing final assault. We will hold as long as ammunition allows. Torres positioned the Abrams on the ridge line, using the natural terrain to mask her approach. Through her thermal imaging system, she could identify individual enemy positions with crystal clarity. The compound's defenders had excellent fields of fire against the trapped SEALs, but their positions were completely exposed to plunging fire from her elevated position. She began target acquisition, systematically identifying priority targets. Her finger hovered over the firing controls as enemy fighters below prepared to overrun Kane's position. The moment of decision had arrived, and 68 tons of American armor stood poised to change everything. The enemy assault began with devastating coordination. Machine gun teams laid down suppressing fire while rocket-propelled grenades streaked toward the SEAL's position. Explosions erupted against the rocks, sending deadly fragments whining through the air. Kane pressed himself against the ground as shrapnel peppered the area around them. Insurgent fighters emerged from concealed bunkers, advancing in disciplined fire teams with overlapping support. Their battle cries echoed across the valley as they closed distance on the trapped Americans. Kane could see individual faces now, weapons raised and ready for the final killing shots. Torres tracked the advancing enemy through her targeting system, her training taking over with mechanical precision. The Abrams main gun swiveled with hydraulic smoothness, acquiring the first target. Her finger tightened on the trigger as dozens of insurgents rushed toward Kane's position. The thunder of 68 tons of armor preparing to unleash hell reverberated through the desert air. Enemy fighters below had no idea that death approached from above. Guided by a woman they would have dismissed as merely another support soldier. The moment of reckoning had arrived with devastating finality. The Abrams main gun roared like thunder across the valley. Torres's first round obliterated an enemy machine gun nest in a spectacular explosion of concrete and steel. Before the debris had settled, she was already acquiring her next target. Her hands moved across the controls with practiced expertise, each movement precise and deadly. The massive tank rolled forward over the ridge line, its appearance on the battlefield creating instant chaos among the insurgent forces. Enemy fighters scattered as the Abrams descended into the valley like an avenging angel of American firepower. Torres fired again, this time destroying a mortar position that had been raining death on Kane's team. Kane looked up in stunned amazement as the unexpected cavalry arrived. The distinctive roar of the M182's turbine engine mixed with the thunder of its 120mm smoothbore cannon. Whoever was driving that tank possessed exceptional skill, hitting targets with surgical precision while maneuvering through terrain that would challenge most experienced tank commanders. Torres spoke in her radio for the first time. Neptune 6, this is Guardian Angel. I have you covered. Prepare for immediate extraction support. The battlefield transformation had begun. Torres demonstrated masterful tank tactics that would have impressed even the most seasoned armor commanders. She used the Abrams' superior mobility to engage enemy positions from multiple angles, never remaining stationary long enough for return fire. Her cannon rounds found their marks with devastating accuracy, while her machine guns swept insurgent infantry, attempting to flank her position. The compound's elaborate defensive positions crumbled under her systematic assault. Guard towers disappeared in eruptions of smoke and debris. Machine gun nests became smoking craters. Enemy fighters who had confidently prepared to massacre 6 trapped SEALs now found themselves on the receiving end of overwhelming firepower delivered with surgical precision. Kane seized the initiative, rallying his wounded team for extraction. "Move, move, move," he shouted, leading his men toward the tank that had transformed their certain death into salvation. Collins helped carry Rodriguez while Morrison stumbled forward despite his head wound. Torres provided continuous fire support, her tactical awareness allowing her to engage threats while simultaneously creating safe corridors for the SEAL team's movement. Her radio crackled with professional efficiency. Neptune 6, advance to my 6 o'clock position. I have overwatch on your movement. Kane reached the Abrams and stared up at the commander's hatch in amazement. When it opened, Staff Sergeant Valentina Torres emerged, her face streaked with sweat and determination. The SEAL commander who had led countless dangerous missions found himself speechless before the woman who had single-handedly saved his entire team. "You came for us," Kane said, his voice filled with profound gratitude and respect. Torres simply nodded as she helped load the wounded SEALs onto her tank. Rodriguez was stabilized and conscious again, while Morrison's head wound had stopped bleeding. The ride back to base was a victory procession. Word of the rescue had spread through military communications networks, and Torres found herself surrounded by soldiers who wanted to shake her hand. Kane insisted on personally briefing his commanding officer about her extraordinary tactical skills and battlefield heroism. 3 weeks later, at a formal ceremony attended by senior military leadership, Torres received the Bronze Star Medal for her actions. Kane stood proudly as her citation was read aloud. If this story moved you, drop a comment about what resonated most with you, or share if you've witnessed similar courage in real life.